China's capital wakes slowly, but inside the Foreign Ministry compound, the mood is noticeably more focused. It is a day tied to diplomacy, history, and the careful recalibration of a relationship that has weathered war, sanctions, and shifting global alliances. As journalists settle into their seats, arranging cameras, microphones, and laptops, the anticipation builds. The arrival of Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning marks the beginning of a briefing that speaks not just to China's view of a single bilateral meeting, but to its evolving strategy in the Middle East, especially in a Syria still scarred by years of conflict and fragmentation. When Mao Ning steps into the room, she does so with the quiet discipline characteristic of Beijing's official briefings. Behind her words lies a broader narrative, one shaped by the visit of Syrian Foreign Minister Asaad, al-Shaibani, who has travelled to Beijing on his first official visit. It is a moment China intends to frame as symbolic and perhaps even historic. Next year marks 70 years of diplomatic ties between China and Syria, ties that survived the Cold War, civil war, and shifting geopolitical blocs. This history becomes the anchor of the briefing. Speaking in measured tones, Mao Ning delivers the message clearly. China believes the time has come to gradually resume exchanges at all levels and in all fields with Syria. The choice of the word gradually is deliberate. Beijing is signalling openness, yet caution, pragmatism, and a step-by-step approach that avoids political shockwaves. Behind this slow restart is a recognition of Syria's fragile state. After more than a decade of war, regional power struggles, and isolation imposed by Western sanctions. Her words are not simply procedural. They reveal a strategic posture. China sees Syria not only as a long-standing diplomatic partner, but also as part of its broader Middle East calculus, one centred on connectivity, reconstruction, and long-term political influence. When Mao Ning states that China welcomes Syria's participation in the Belt and Road Initiative, she is not making a symbolic gesture. Beijing sees post-war Syria as part of the infrastructure corridor linking the Mediterranean to Asia, a corridor China has eyed for years through trade routes, ports, and reconstruction contracts. But the statement goes beyond infrastructure. China also calls for strengthened cooperation within multilateral frameworks such as the United Nations and the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum. This is China positioning itself as a stabilizing voice, an actor capable of engaging without the political preconditions that define Western approaches. It is Beijing asserting that the stabilization of Syria must happen through dialogue rather than coercion, through reconstruction rather than isolation, and through multilateral cooperation rather than unilateral demands. Throughout the briefing, Mao Ning maintains her calm demeanour, responding to questions with the diplomatic discipline expected from Beijing's official channels. But behind every carefully chosen sentence lies the recognition that Syria's slow reintegration into global diplomatic life is not guaranteed. The humanitarian catastrophe remains immense. Rebuilding is a monumental task, and the political landscape remains fragmented between government-held territories, Kurdish-administered areas, and pockets of foreign influence. Yet China is signalling unmistakably that the door is open. As journalists prepare their next round of questions, Mao Ning emphasises China's willingness to work together with the international community to contribute to Syria's security and stability. In diplomatic terms, this is Beijing positioning itself as a middle power capable of brokering dialogue. It also hints at China's growing desire to play a more active role in Middle Eastern diplomacy, something that became clear earlier this decade when Beijing brokered a landmark rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The Syria file is different, more complex, more fragmented, and far more layered, with geopolitical residue, but China's confidence is visible. The briefing room, filled with journalists who have watched China's foreign policy evolve over the past decade, understands the significance. Syria, once a central battleground in global power struggles, now stands as a test case for post-war reconstruction led not by the West, but by emerging powers seeking a new order. The visit of Asaad al-Shaibani is particularly symbolic. For years, Damascus found itself increasingly isolated. Western nations severed ties or downgraded diplomatic engagement. Sanctions tightened. Embassies shuttered. But across the Middle East, the tide has shifted. Several Arab states have reopened channels, embassies, or high-level dialogues with Damascus. The Arab League reinstated Syria's membership. Regional power alignments began to recalibrate. Into this landscape steps China. The Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing's global infrastructure network, remains central to China's international strategy. Syria, geographically positioned between Asia, the Middle East and the Mediterranean, offers strategic potential if stability can be restored. Reconstruction needs are immense. Some estimates project up to $300 billion required to repair Syria's infrastructure, housing and critical services. At a time when Western funding is constrained by sanctions and political conditions, China sees an opening. But China's interest is not purely economic. Beijing has consistently emphasized the principles of sovereignty and non-interference positions that resonate strongly with Damascus. In return, Syria has supported China on multiple issues at the United Nations, including human rights resolutions and territorial sovereignty questions. The diplomatic relationship is one of mutual reinforcement, and Beijing is fully aware of its value. As Mao Ning continues taking questions, her responses reflect this broader strategy. She refrains from addressing Western sanctions directly. Beijing avoids overt confrontation, but she subtly underscores China's position. Reconstruction and stability require international cooperation, not isolation. Journalists in the room direct questions toward China's regional intentions as Beijing expands its diplomatic footprint. Observers note its increasing involvement in Middle East power balances. The Syria-China dynamic offers Beijing a long-term opportunity to build influence without the military entanglements that defined Western intervention. By focusing on reconstruction, infrastructure and diplomacy, China presents itself as an alternative stabilizing force, one that prioritizes economic revival over political transformation. While the briefing focuses primarily on the meeting between Wang Yi and Asaad al-Shaibani, it also reflects China's broader push to re-engage with conflicted or sanctioned states. Beijing has taken similar approaches in Afghanistan, Iran and parts of Africa, working to expand trade, secure mineral access and strengthen political alliances. Inside the hall, journalists type rapidly as Mao Ning speaks. Her lines referencing the 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties draw attention. There are few moments in modern Middle Eastern diplomacy when a war-torn nation maintains 7 decades of uninterrupted relations with a major global power. Beijing sees this anniversary as more than symbolic. It is a diplomatic opportunity. At the same time, China's move comes at a moment when Syria is becoming a space where global powers test the limits of influence. Russia remains deeply involved militarily and politically. Iran maintains key strategic footholds. The United States retains military presence in parts of northeastern Syria, particularly areas controlled by Kurdish forces. Turkey continues to hold border zones and influence opposition-controlled regions. Into this contested arena, China enters subtly, using diplomacy rather than force. The press briefing continues with journalists probing whether China seeks a more active political role in mediating the Syrian conflict. Mao Ning, following Beijing's cautious style, does not commit to direct mediation, but emphasizes cooperation within the United Nations framework. This is consistent with China's broader diplomatic pattern, supporting political processes without directly intervening in negotiations unless invited by all parties. Still, Beijing's repeated references to multilateral dialogue hint at readiness to expand its diplomatic involvement if conditions align. China's foreign policy over the past years shows that when a political vacuum exists, such as between Saudi Arabia and Iran, Beijing is willing to step in, particularly when the outcome strengthens regional stability aligned with China's economic interests. Reporters also ask about China's position on reconstruction. While Mao Ning avoids providing specific financial commitments, she highlights China's openness to Syria becoming more integrated into the Belt and Road Initiative. In previous years. Chinese companies have expressed interest in rebuilding energy grids, transportation networks, telecommunications, and even industrial zones in Syria. The war, however, made such projects impossible. With Damascus now seeking greater reintegration into regional structures, the possibility of renewed Chinese involvement becomes increasingly realistic. Meanwhile, Syria's need for reconstruction is immense and visible in every corner of the country. Destroyed housing, collapsed hospitals, displaced communities, and broken infrastructure. For Beijing, this becomes both a humanitarian and economic opportunity. China has experienced rebuilding in conflict or post-conflict environments, and its companies often operate efficiently where Western firms face political restrictions. Mao Ning's remarks also emphasize China's desire to collaborate with the international community on issues of security and stability. This is crucial. Syria's stability remains fragile. Pockets of conflict still exist. Terrorist groups remain active in certain regions, and political reconciliation is far from complete. Beijing's call for international cooperation signals that China views Syria's recovery as a shared responsibility, not just an arena for great power rivalry. As the briefing progresses, the visual scene is one of journalists steadily reporting, reflecting, and interpreting. Mao Ning's calm tone contrasts with the complexity of the issues at hand. Her message is consistent. China supports a measured, gradual return of Syria to the diplomatic stage and welcomes cooperation across levels, bilateral, regional, and international. But this briefing serves another purpose as well. It signals to regional states that China is watching closely, engaged thoughtfully, and prepared to play a stabilizing role without the political pressure often associated with Western involvement. Syria's foreign minister, in choosing Beijing for his official visit, sends his own message. Syria seeks partners who respect its sovereignty and long-term recovery goals. For Damascus, China represents both a political ally and a potential economic engine for rebuilding. This is why the upcoming anniversary resonates not merely in symbolic gestures, but in real diplomatic and economic potential. As analysts outside the briefing room examine the implications, they note a growing trend. China's role in the Middle East is steadily expanding from trade-focused engagement to strategic diplomacy. Beijing's approach differs fundamentally from the power politics that dominated the region for decades. Instead of military coalitions or political demands, China promotes stability through economic integration, infrastructure development, and dialogue. This does not mean China's approach is without self-interest. Far from it. Stability enhances trade, secures supply chains, and ensures safe passage along maritime and overland routes crucial to China's global economic strategy.